The prison ship Vorthax Revenge drifted through the void of space, its hull scarred by countless battles across the galaxy. Inside its cramped holding cells, hundreds of captured warriors from dozens of different species waited for their fate. Some would be sold as gladiators, others as laborers on mining worlds, and the unlucky ones would become experimental subjects for the Empire's twisted scientists. Marcus Chen pressed his back against the cold metal wall of Cell Block 7, watching the guards patrol the narrow corridors. The human soldier had been captured 3 weeks ago during the Battle of Kepler Station, where his unit had held off an entire Imperial fleet for 6 hours before being overwhelmed. Now he sat among aliens he couldn't even pronounce the names of, all of them prisoners of the Zephyrian Empire. The Zephyrians ruled half the known galaxy with an iron fist. Their technology was superior to most species, their military was ruthless, and their empire had been expanding for over 1,000 years. Humans had only made contact with galactic civilization 15 years ago, and they were already at war with the most powerful force in the universe. Marcus studied his fellow prisoners through the energy bars of his cell. To his left, a massive creature that looked like a cross between a bear and a rhinoceros sat in meditation. The being's thick purple skin was covered in ritual scars, and its 4 arms moved in complex patterns as it performed what looked like a prayer ritual. Marcus had learned that the creature was called Thorgrim, a warrior priest from the planet Bralos, captured during the siege of the Outer Rim colonies. Across the corridor, a reptilian being with bright green scales and multiple eyes paced back and forth in its cell. The alien had introduced itself as S. Cynthia, a naval commander from the aquatic world of Hydros Prime. Her people had been fighting the Empire for over 50 years, ever since the Zephyrians had poisoned their oceans to force them into submission. The most unusual prisoner, however, sat in the cell directly across from Marcus. She appeared almost human, with pale blue skin, silver hair, and eyes that seemed to shift color from purple to gold. Her clothing, though torn and dirty, was clearly made of expensive materials. Most telling of all were the intricate tattoos that covered her arms and neck, tattoos that Marcus had seen on Zephyrian nobility in intelligence briefings. The woman had been brought to the prison ship 2 days ago, unconscious and badly injured. When she finally awoke, she had remained completely silent, ignoring all attempts at conversation from the other prisoners. Marcus had tried speaking to her in Standard Galactic, the common language used across most of the galaxy, but she had simply stared at him with those strange, shifting eyes. A commotion in the corridor interrupted Marcus's thoughts. Heavy footsteps echoed through the prison block as a squad of Zephyrian guards approached. The aliens were tall and imposing, with dark gray skin, elongated skulls, and eyes like black pearls. Their armor gleamed with built-in weapons systems and energy shields. "Prisoner transfer," announced the squad leader in heavily accented Standard Galactic. "Cell designation 7A through 7D, move quickly or face punishment." Marcus felt his stomach drop. Cell 7A was his cell. He had hoped to avoid being transferred to the gladiatorial arenas for at least a few more weeks. Once prisoners were sent to the fighting pits, their life expectancy dropped to a matter of days. The energy bars of his cell flickered and disappeared. "Out!" commanded one of the guards, pointing an energy rifle at Marcus's chest. "Keep hands visible. Any sudden movements will result in immediate termination." Marcus slowly stood and walked out of his cell, joining Thorgrim, S. Cynthia, and the mysterious blue-skinned woman in the corridor. The guards formed a tight formation around them, weapons ready. "Where are you taking us?" asked S. Cynthia, her voice carrying a slight hiss due to her reptilian vocal cords. "Silence," barked the squad leader. "Prisoners do not speak unless spoken to." They were marched through a series of corridors that Marcus had never seen before. The prison ship was massive, containing thousands of cells across dozens of levels. After 15 minutes of walking, they reached a heavily secured section of the ship that required multiple identity scans for the guards to access. The corridor they entered was different from the rest of the ship. Instead of bare metal walls, this section had ornate decorations and what appeared to be expensive artwork. The floor was covered in a soft, carpeted material that muffled their footsteps. "This is the noble's quarter," whispered Thorgrim, speaking in a low voice that only his fellow prisoners could hear. "Why would they bring us here?" Before anyone could answer, they were led into a large chamber that took Marcus's breath away. The room was enormous, with a vaulted ceiling that reached at least 30 feet high. One entire wall was made of transparent aluminum, providing a spectacular view of the stars outside. Elegant furniture was arranged throughout the space, including what appeared to be a dining table that could seat 20 people. At the far end of the room, a figure sat on an elaborate throne-like chair. Even from a distance, Marcus could see that this was no ordinary Zephyrian. The being was larger than the guards, with skin that seemed to shimmer between different shades of gray and purple. Jeweled ornaments covered its head and arms, and its clothing was made of materials that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. "Imperial Crown Prince Vorthak," announced the squad leader. "The prisoners you requested." The prince stood slowly, his movements graceful despite his imposing size. As he approached, Marcus could see that Vorthak's eyes were different from other Zephyrians. Instead of being completely black, they had swirling patterns of silver and gold that seemed to move on their own. "Excellent," said the prince, his voice deep and resonant. Unlike the guards, he spoke standard galactic with perfect pronunciation. "These specimens should provide adequate entertainment for tonight's festivities." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Entertainment meant only one thing: gladiatorial combat for the amusement of Zephyrian nobles. Prince Vorthak walked slowly around the group of prisoners, examining each one like a buyer at a livestock auction. He paused in front of Thorgrim, nodding approvingly at the alien's massive frame and battle scars. He lingered near Cynthia, commenting on the speed and agility that her reptilian species was known for. When he reached Marcus, the prince stopped and stared for a long moment. "Ah, a human," he said with what might have been amusement. "Your species has become quite famous throughout the Empire. Small, weak, short-lived, yet somehow you continue to resist our expansion. Fascinating." Marcus met the prince's gaze steadily, refusing to show fear or submission. "We're full of surprises," he said quietly. Prince Vorthak laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Indeed you are. I have heard stories of human warriors accomplishing impossible feats through sheer determination and what you call stubbornness. Tonight, we shall see if these stories are true." The prince moved to the last prisoner, the blue-skinned woman who had remained silent. As he approached her, however, something strange happened. The woman slowly raised her head and looked directly into Vorthak's eyes. When she spoke, her voice was clear and commanding, and she spoke in what Marcus recognized as High Zephyrian, the formal language of the Empire's ruling class. "Hello, brother," she said. The effect on Prince Vorthak was immediate and dramatic. His face went through a series of expressions: surprise, anger, fear, and something that might have been relief. The guards around them tensed, their weapons automatically targeting the woman who had just revealed herself as Zephyrian royalty. "Princess Zerafina," Vorthak said, his voice now carefully controlled. "I was told you were dead." The woman, Princess Zerafina, slowly stood. Despite her torn clothing and obvious injuries, she carried herself with unmistakable royal dignity. "As you can see, brother, reports of my death were greatly exaggerated." Marcus's mind raced as he tried to process this revelation. The quiet woman who had been sharing their prison block was a Zephyrian princess. More than that, she was the sister of the crown prince himself. But if she was royalty, why had she been imprisoned with common prisoners? "How did you survive the attack on Nexus Prime?" Prince Vorthak asked, circling his sister like a predator. "My sources confirmed that the entire diplomatic mission was eliminated." Princess Zerafina smiled, and Marcus noticed that her expression held no warmth whatsoever. "Your sources were incorrect, dear brother, though not for lack of trying." The implication hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Prince Vorthak had been responsible for the attack that was supposed to kill his sister. "I see," said the prince. "And now you find yourself in my custody once again. How convenient." "Convenient for whom?" Princess Zerafina asked. "You may find that your plans have become more complicated than you anticipated." Prince Vorthak gestured to his guards. "Take the princess to secure quarters, full restraints and constant surveillance. She is not to have contact with any other prisoners or crew members without my direct authorization." As the guards moved toward Princess Zerafina, she did something that surprised everyone in the room. Instead of resisting or trying to escape, she stepped closer to Marcus and placed her hand on his arm. "Wait," she said, still speaking in High Zephyrian. "I claim right of combat selection." Prince Vorthak froze. "What did you say?" "You heard me clearly, brother. According to imperial law, any member of the royal family facing execution has the right to select a champion to fight for their life. I invoke this right. The crown prince's expression darkened. You are not facing execution, Zerafina. You are facing imprisonment for treason against the empire. Treason? Princess Zerafina laughed, and the sound was like music compared to her brother's mechanical laughter. I committed no treason, brother, but you have. You violated imperial law by attacking a diplomatic mission under royal protection. You attempted to murder a member of the royal family. You have conspired against the emperor himself. Marcus could see that Prince Vorthak was struggling to maintain his composure. Clearly, his sister had just revealed information that could destroy him if it became public knowledge. Very well, the prince said through clenched teeth. If you wish to play games with ancient laws, so be it. You have the right to select a champion from among these prisoners. When your champion falls in combat, your guilt will be proven beyond doubt, and your execution will be justified. Princess Zerafina turned to look at each of the 3 prisoners who stood with her. Her eyes lingered on Thorgrim's massive frame and battle-scarred hide. She studied Cynthia's lithe form and predatory grace. Finally, her gaze settled on Marcus. The human soldier was not the largest or strongest of the prisoners. He stood only average height for his species, with brown hair and green eyes that held a steady, determined expression. His body showed the lean muscle of a career soldier, but he was clearly built for endurance and agility rather than raw power. I choose the human, Princess Zerafina said. The silence that followed was deafening. Prince Vorthak stared at his sister as if she had lost her mind. The guards exchanged confused glances. Even Thorgrim and Cynthia looked shocked by the princess's choice. The human, Prince Vorthak said. Sister, have your recent hardships affected your judgment? This creature is barely half the size of a proper warrior. He has no natural weapons, no enhanced strength, no special abilities that would give him an advantage in combat. Princess Zerafina smiled again, and this time Marcus caught a glimpse of genuine warmth in her expression. Perhaps, brother, but you forget the most important lesson our father taught us about warfare. Which lesson is that? Never underestimate your enemy. She turned to face Marcus directly. Will you fight as my champion human warrior? Marcus looked into her shifting eyes and saw something he hadn't expected: hope. This alien princess, member of the species that had been trying to conquer and enslave humanity for over a decade, was asking for his help. More than that, she was trusting him with her life. What exactly would I be fighting? Marcus asked. Prince Vorthak answered before his sister could speak. You will face Gorvak the Destroyer in single combat. He is the current champion of the Imperial Arena, undefeated in over 200 battles. He has killed representatives of 43 different species, including several humans. Marcus felt his mouth go dry. He had heard of Gorvak during intelligence briefings. The creature was a legend among gladiators, a killing machine that had never shown mercy to any opponent. Fighting Gorvak was essentially a death sentence. And if I somehow manage to win? Marcus asked. Then Princess Zerafina will be declared innocent of all charges and released, Prince Vorthak said. Of course, such an outcome is impossible. Gorvak has never been defeated. Marcus looked at Princess Zerafina again. She hadn't said anything during this exchange, but her eyes spoke volumes. She knew she was asking him to die for her. She also knew it was the only chance either of them had. I accept, Marcus said. The words seemed to echo in the large chamber. Prince Vorthak smiled with obvious satisfaction, already imagining his sister's execution. Princess Zerafina closed her eyes for a moment, and Marcus thought he saw her whisper something that might have been a prayer. Excellent, said the prince. The combat will take place tonight during the victory celebration for our recent conquest of the Altarian system. The entire noble class will be in attendance. It should be quite a spectacle. The guards moved forward to escort the prisoners back to their cells, but Princess Zerafina held up a hand to stop them. By law, I am entitled to 1 hour of private consultation with my champion before the combat, she said. This right cannot be denied. Prince Vorthak's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Very well, you have 1 hour. Guards, escort them to Consultation Chamber 3, full surveillance but no audio monitoring per imperial law. Marcus found himself being led alongside Princess Zerafina to a smaller chamber several corridors away. The room was spartanly furnished with just a table and 2 chairs. but like the prince's quarters, it had a large window showing the stars outside. Once the guards had sealed them inside, Princess Zerafina immediately dropped into one of the chairs and buried her face in her hands. For the first time since Marcus had seen her, she looked exhausted and vulnerable. "You should not have accepted," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I had no right to ask such a thing of you." Marcus sat down across from her. "You didn't ask, you gave me a choice, there's a difference." She looked up at him with those strange, color-shifting eyes. "You will die tonight, Marcus Chen. Gorvek is not just a gladiator, he is a genetically enhanced killing machine. His species, the Brutox, are already formidable warriors. The Empire has made him into something beyond nature." "How do you know my name?" Marcus asked. "I have been watching and listening since I arrived on the ship," Princess Zerafina said. "You interest me, human. In our culture, warriors who face impossible odds are expected to beg for mercy or rage against their fate. You do neither. You simply accept what comes and prepare to face it. This is not common among the species I have encountered." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "Princess, can I ask you something?" "Please call me Zira, and yes, you may ask. Why were you on that diplomatic mission that your brother attacked, and why does he want you dead?" Zira was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the stars. "Our father, Emperor Thanok, is dying," she said finally. "He has been ill for nearly a year, though this information is kept from the general population. When he dies, there will be a succession crisis." "Your brother isn't the heir." "He is the eldest son, so by law he should inherit the throne. But our father has concerns about Vorthak's fitness to rule. My brother is ambitious beyond reason. He believes the Empire should expand at any cost, that we should conquer every world and enslave every species we encounter." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Isn't that what the Empire already does?" "To some extent, yes. But my father and his advisors have always believed in selective conquest. We take worlds that have strategic value or resources we need, but we also form alliances when it serves our interests. Vorthak would turn the entire galaxy into a battlefield." "And you disagree with that approach?" Zira looked at him with surprise. "You are asking if I, a princess of the Zephyrian Empire, am opposed to conquest and slavery." "I'm asking what you believe." She was quiet again, clearly struggling with how much to reveal. "I was on a secret diplomatic mission to the Centauri Alliance," she said finally. "My father sent me to negotiate a peace treaty." Marcus felt his world shift. The Centauri Alliance was humanity's strongest ally in the war against the Empire, if the Zephyrians were secretly negotiating peace. "My father believes that the war with your species and your allies has gone on long enough," Zira continued. "Humans have proven to be far more resilient and resourceful than anyone anticipated. Every year, the cost of fighting you grows higher, while the strategic benefits grow smaller." "So your father wants to end the war?" "He wants to end this phase of expansion entirely. Not just the war with humans, but the Empire's aggressive expansion in general. He believes we have grown large enough that we should focus on managing what we already have rather than constantly seeking new conquests." Marcus began to understand the political situation. "And your brother found out about the peace negotiations." "Vorthak has supporters throughout the military and the noble class. They believe that ending the expansion would make the Empire weak, that other species would see it as an opportunity to rebel against us. They may be right. So he arranged to have the diplomatic mission destroyed, making it look like an attack by Alliance forces." "Exactly. With the peace negotiations ended and his primary political rival dead, Vorthak would be free to continue his aggressive policies when he becomes emperor." Marcus leaned forward. "But you survived." "I survived, and I have proof of his involvement in the attack. Documents, recorded communications, even testimony from one of his co-conspirators who was killed during the raid. If this information reaches my father or the Imperial Council, Vorthak will be executed for treason." Now Marcus understood why Princess Zerafina had been imprisoned with common criminals. Her brother couldn't simply execute her openly without revealing his own crimes. Instead, he planned to have her killed in what would appear to be legitimate combat, removing the threat she posed while maintaining his innocence. "There's something else you should know," Zira said. "The victory celebration tonight is not just for the conquest of the Altarian system. Vorthak is planning to announce his engagement to Duchess Kithara of the Outer Rim territories. Political marriage. The most important political marriage in the Empire's history. Kithara controls the largest fleet in the Outer Territories, and her family has connections to every major noble house. With her support, Vorthak will be unstoppable when our father dies. Marcus rubbed his forehead, trying to process all of this information. So if I somehow manage to win tonight, what happens then? If you win, I will be declared innocent and released. I can then return to the capital with proof of my brother's treason. The engagement announcement will be postponed, and Vorthak's political position will be severely weakened. And if I lose? If you lose, I will be executed as a traitor, my proof will disappear with me, and Vorthak will announce his engagement as planned. When our father dies, the Empire will continue its expansion until every world in the galaxy either serves us or lies in ruins. Marcus looked out the window at the stars, thinking about Earth, about the billions of humans who were counting on soldiers like him to protect them from exactly this scenario. He thought about his sister Sarah, who was serving aboard a deep space patrol ship somewhere in the outer colonies. He thought about his parents, who had sent him messages every week until communications with his unit had been cut off. Princess Zira, I need to ask you something else. Yes. If your father is serious about ending the expansion and making peace with the Alliance, would that include Earth? Would humans be safe? Zira met his gaze steadily. I cannot promise that all conflicts would end immediately. There are too many military commanders and nobles who profit from the war. But yes, my father's plan includes a permanent ceasefire with Earth and the recognition of human territorial sovereignty. And you support this plan? I do. Marcus stood and walked to the window, looking out at the vast emptiness of space. Somewhere out there, the war was continuing. Human ships were fighting desperate battles against overwhelming odds. Colonies were being evacuated or destroyed. Families were being torn apart. Why, he asked without turning around. Why do I support peace? Why should I believe you? You're a member of the species that has been trying to wipe out my people for 15 years. Your empire has destroyed entire human colonies. Your military has enslaved thousands of our people. Why should I trust anything you say? When Zira answered, her voice was soft but clear. Because I have seen what war costs, Marcus. I have visited the worlds that my people have conquered. I have seen the refugee camps and the slave markets and the mass graves. I have watched children orphaned and families destroyed, and I have done nothing to stop it because I told myself it was necessary for the Empire. She paused, and when she continued, there was pain in her voice. 2 years ago, I was part of a diplomatic mission to Kepler Station. Marcus spun around to face her. Kepler Station was where he had been captured, where his unit had made their last stand. I was there during the battle, Zira said. I watched from my ship as human soldiers fought against impossible odds to buy time for civilian evacuations. I saw your people sacrifice themselves without hesitation to save others, and I realized that everything I had been taught about humans was a lie. What do you mean? We were told that humans were weak, cowardly, primitive. We were taught that your species would crumble quickly under pressure, that you had no real military capability or strategic thinking. Instead, I watched a few hundred human soldiers hold off an entire Imperial fleet for 6 hours. 6 hours, Marcus. Do you know how many lives were saved during those 6 hours? Marcus felt a lump forming in his throat. How many? Over 200,000 civilians were evacuated from Kepler Station during that battle. 200,000 people who would have been killed or enslaved if your unit hadn't bought them time to escape. She stood and walked over to him, placing her hand on his arm again. I saw you during that battle, Marcus. I watched you coordinate the defense of the eastern sector. I saw you stay behind to help wounded soldiers while the evacuation ships departed. You and your people fought with a courage and honor that impressed even our military commanders. Marcus stared at her in amazement. You were there. I was there, and when I returned to the capital, I told my father everything I had seen. That conversation was the beginning of his decision to pursue peace negotiations. The room fell silent except for the distant hum of the ship's engines. Marcus felt as if the universe had shifted around him. This alien princess had been present at the most important battle of his military career, had witnessed the sacrifice of his friends and comrades, and had been moved by what she saw to become an advocate for peace. "There is something else you should know," Zira said quietly. "Something that may help you in your fight tonight." "What?" Gorvak's greatest strength is also his greatest weakness. The genetic enhancements that make him so powerful also make him incredibly aggressive and impulsive. He relies on brute force and intimidation to win his battles. He has never faced an opponent who used strategy and tactics instead of raw violence. Marcus nodded slowly. "What do you know about his fighting style?" For the next 40 minutes, Princess Zerafina provided Marcus with detailed information about Gorvak's previous battles. She had access to combat recordings through the ship systems, and together they analyzed the gladiator's patterns and tendencies. Gorvak was indeed a formidable opponent. Standing nearly 8 feet tall and weighing over 400 pounds, the Brudok gladiator possessed natural armor plating on his arms and torso. His strength was sufficient to crush steel with his bare hands, and his speed was surprising for such a large creature. However, as Zira had suggested, Gorvak's fighting style was predictable. He always began battles by charging straight at his opponents, using his size and speed to overwhelm them quickly. If his initial assault failed, he would become increasingly aggressive and reckless, making himself vulnerable to counterattacks. "What weapons will I have access to?" Marcus asked. Standard gladiatorial combat allows each fighter to choose from a selection of traditional weapons. Nothing high-tech or overly sophisticated. Think swords, spears, axes, that sort of thing. Marcus considered his options. In hand-to-hand combat, Gorvak's advantages were overwhelming, but if Marcus could keep his distance and use superior tactics. "Is there a time limit on the fight?" "No, combat continues until one fighter is dead or yields. However, yielding is considered deeply shameful in our culture, and it's rarely accepted by the crowd." A soft chime sounded, indicating that their consultation time was nearly over. Zira reached across the table and took Marcus's hands in hers. "I am sorry for involving you in this," she said. "I had no right to endanger your life for my political purposes." Marcus looked into her eyes, noting how they seemed to shift from purple to gold in the light from the window. "Zira, can I ask you one more question?" "Of course." "If we somehow both survive this, what happens between our species? I mean between you and me personally." She seemed surprised by the question. I do not understand what you are asking." "I'm asking if you think a human and a Zephyrian could ever be friends. Real friends, I mean, not just political allies." Zira was quiet for a long moment. "Marcus, in my entire life, I have never had a real friend. I'm a princess of the Empire. I have advisors, servants, bodyguards, and political allies, but never a friend." "That wasn't what I asked." She smiled, and for the first time Marcus saw genuine happiness in her expression. "Yes, Marcus Chen, I believe we could be friends." The chamber door opened, and the guards entered to escort them back to their respective quarters. As they walked through the corridors, Marcus noticed that the ship's atmosphere had changed. There was more activity in the hallways, and he could hear the distant sounds of music and celebration. The victory celebration was beginning, which meant that in a few hours he would be fighting for his life in front of the Empire's nobility. The odds against him were astronomical, but Marcus found himself feeling strangely calm. He had fought impossible battles before. He had faced overwhelming odds and somehow survived. Tonight would be no different, except that this time he wasn't just fighting for his own life or for military objectives. Tonight, he was fighting for the chance of peace between his species and the most powerful empire in the galaxy. As the guards separated him from Zira, she managed to whisper one last thing in standard galactic. "Remember, Marcus, sometimes the smallest stone can bring down the mightiest giant." Back in his cell, Marcus began his mental preparation for combat. He reviewed everything Zira had told him about Gorvak's fighting style, visualized different tactical approaches, and tried to calm his mind for the battle ahead. In a cell on the opposite side of the ship, Princess Zerafina sat in meditation, sending prayers to her ancestors that the human warrior would prove as resourceful in single combat as his species had proven in war. Neither of them knew that their conversation had been monitored, despite the legal prohibition against it. Prince Vorthak had used illegal surveillance technology to record every word they had spoken, and now he knew exactly how much his sister knew about his treasonous activities. The Crown Prince stood in his private quarters, staring out at the stars and planning his next moves. The combat between Marcus and Gorvak was no longer just about eliminating his sister. Now it was about covering up his own crimes and ensuring his path to the throne remained clear. Prince Vorthak activated his personal communicator and sent an encrypted message to his allies on the capital world. The message contained detailed instructions for eliminating Princess Zerafina's proof of his treason, along with orders to accelerate his engagement announcement to Duchess Kithara. Then he sent a second message, this one to the gladiator trainers responsible for Gorvak. The message was brief but clear. Make sure the human dies slowly and painfully, and ensure that Princess Zerafina has a clear view of his suffering before she faces her own execution. As the ship's celebration began and the nobility gathered to witness the evening's entertainment, 3 different species prepared for a battle that would determine the fate of the galaxy. The human soldier relied on his training and determination. The Zephyrian princess placed her faith in the courage of her chosen champion, and the Brudok gladiator simply looked forward to adding another kill to his already impressive record. None of them could predict how the ancient gladiatorial arena would become the stage for a moment that would change everything, not just for the 3 individuals involved, but for every living being in their corner of the universe. The arena aboard the Vorthak's Revenge was a marvel of imperial engineering. Built into the ship's largest cargo bay, the circular fighting pit could accommodate nearly 1,000 spectators in tiered seating that rose toward the chamber's ceiling. Energy shields protected the audience from any weapons or debris that might escape the combat zone, while advanced holographic systems provided multiple viewing angles for the nobility's entertainment. Marcus stood in the fighters' preparation chamber, a small room adjacent to the arena where gladiators traditionally spent their final moments before combat. The space was spartanly furnished with basic equipment for weapon maintenance and a small shrine where warriors could make their peace with whatever gods they served. He had been given standard gladiatorial armor, a simple chest piece made of hardened leather, metal bracers for his forearms, and lightweight boots designed for mobility rather than protection. The armor was functional but minimal, designed to allow for spectacular combat rather than actual survival. The weapon selection had been more encouraging. Marcus had chosen a long spear with a steel tip and hardwood shaft, a short sword designed for quick strikes, and a small shield that could be strapped to his forearm. The weapons were well-made and properly balanced, though they seemed almost primitive compared to the energy weapons he was accustomed to using. Through the chamber's small window, Marcus could see the arena filling with spectators. Zephyrian nobles in their finest clothing took their seats in the premium sections, while military officers and ship's crew occupied the upper tiers. At the center of the front row, a special viewing box had been constructed for Prince Vorthak and his most important guests. The arena floor itself was a circle of sand approximately 50 feet in diameter, surrounded by walls that rose 15 feet to the first row of spectators. Ancient Zephyrian tradition dictated that gladiatorial combat should take place on natural ground rather than artificial surfaces, so the sand had been imported from the Empire's homeworld specifically for this purpose. Marcus tested the weight and balance of his weapons one final time, running through basic combat forms to warm up his muscles. The spear felt good in his hands, and the sword was well suited to his fighting style. The shield would provide some protection against Gorvak's massive fists, though Marcus had no illusions about his ability to block the gladiator's full strength. A soft chime indicated that the combat would begin in 10 minutes. Marcus closed his eyes and centered himself, drawing on meditation techniques he had learned during his military training. Fear was natural and healthy in a situation like this, but it could not be allowed to control his actions. He thought about Princess Zerafina, probably sitting in chains somewhere in the viewing area, watching him prepare to die for her cause. He thought about the peace negotiations that might prevent millions of deaths across the galaxy. Most of all, he thought about his fellow humans, scattered across dozens of worlds, fighting a war they couldn't possibly win through conventional means. The chamber door opened, and a Zephyrian official entered. The alien wore elaborate robes that marked him as a representative of the Imperial Sports Commission, the organization responsible for regulating gladiatorial combat throughout the Empire. Fighter designation Human Marcus, the official said, reading from a data pad. You have been selected to participate in trial by combat as champion for Her Royal Highness Princess Zerafina. Do you understand the terms of this combat? I understand, Marcus replied. Victory is achieved only through the death or unconditional surrender of your opponent. Yielding will result in immediate disqualification and the execution of your principal. Use of any weapons other than those provided is forbidden. Interference by any outside party will result in forfeiture and execution. Do you accept these terms? Marcus nodded. I accept. The official made notes on his data pad. Your opponent, Gorvak the Destroyer, has achieved 317 victories in sanctioned combat. His record includes successful battles against representatives of 68 different species. Are you prepared to face this opponent? I'm prepared. Very well, you will be announced in 5 minutes. May your ancestors guide your blade. The official left, and Marcus was alone with his thoughts once more. 317 victories. He tried not to think about how many families had lost fathers, sons, and brothers to the monster he was about to face. Instead, he focused on strategy. Gorvak's size and strength were overwhelming, but they also made him a large target. His enhanced aggression would work against him if Marcus could remain calm and disciplined. Most importantly, the gladiator had never faced an opponent trained in human military tactics. The door opened again, this time admitting a pair of guards who would escort him to the arena. Marcus gathered his weapons and followed them through a corridor that led directly to the fighting pit. As he walked, he could hear the roar of the crowd growing louder. Music played from hidden speakers, and he caught fragments of an announcer describing the evening's entertainment to the assembled nobility. The sound reminded him of sporting events on Earth, except that tonight's sport involved sentient beings fighting to the death. The corridor ended at a heavy gate that led directly onto the arena floor. Through the bars, Marcus could see the sand-covered circle where he would either triumph or die. Bright lights illuminated every inch of the space, ensuring that the audience would have a clear view of the action. Fighter designation Human Marcus, came an amplified voice from the arena. Champion to Her Royal Highness Princess Zerafina, accused of high treason against the Zephyrian Empire. The gate opened, and Marcus stepped into the arena. The roar of the crowd hit him like a physical force, thousands of alien voices cheering, booing, and shouting bets on the outcome of the fight. He walked to the center of the circle, holding his weapons ready but not in an aggressive posture. Looking up at the viewing area, Marcus could see the assembled nobility clearly. They were a diverse group representing dozens of different worlds and cultures within the empire, united only by their wealth and political power. Their faces showed excitement, bloodlust, and anticipation of entertainment. In the special viewing box, Prince Vorthak sat on an elaborate throne-like chair, wearing ceremonial robes that marked his status as crown prince. Next to him sat a stunningly beautiful Zephyrian woman in military dress, undoubtedly Duchess Kithara, his intended bride. The Duchess watched the proceedings with cool professional interest, like a general observing tactical exercises. On the opposite side of the viewing box, Marcus spotted Princess Zerafina. She was chained to a simple chair, her clothing replaced with a plain gray prisoner's garment. Despite her obvious captivity, she maintained her royal bearing, watching the arena with calm dignity. When their eyes met across the space, she nodded slightly, a gesture of encouragement and gratitude. His opponent, the announcer continued, undefeated champion of the Imperial Arena. Victor in 317 sanctioned combats. The terror of 40 galaxies, the unstoppable force of destruction, Gorvak the Destroyer. The gate on the opposite side of the arena opened, and Marcus got his first clear look at the creature he would be fighting. Gorvak was even more imposing than the intelligence reports had suggested. Standing nearly 9 feet tall, the Brudak gladiator was a mountain of muscle and natural armor. His skin was a mottled gray-green color, covered with thick plates that looked like they could deflect sword strikes. His arms were longer than a human's in proportion to his body, ending in massive hands tipped with razor-sharp claws. The gladiator's head was elongated and reptilian, with a mouth full of fangs and small, intelligent eyes that gleamed with bloodlust. Ritual scars covered his torso and arms, marking each of his victories according to Brudak tradition. He wore minimal armor, just metal bands around his wrists and ankles, and carried a single weapon, a massive two-handed war hammer that looked like it could crush a vehicle. Gorvak strode to the center of the arena with the confidence of a predator who had never known defeat. When he saw Marcus, he threw back his head and roared, a sound that echoed off the arena walls and sent chills through the watching crowd. The two fighters faced each other across 10 feet of sand, the size difference between them almost comical. Marcus barely reached Gorvak's chest, and his weapons looked like toys compared to the gladiator's massive warhammer. "Fighters, prepare for combat," announced the referee, a neutral official from one of the Empire's subject species. "Combat begins on my signal and continues until one fighter is unable to continue. May the strongest prove their worth." Marcus settled into a combat stance, spear held ready and shield positioned to protect his vital organs. He had decided to rely on mobility and reach, using the spear to keep Gorvak at a distance while looking for openings to strike vital areas. Gorvak hefted his war hammer and began walking in a slow circle, his eyes never leaving Marcus. The gladiator was clearly studying his opponent, looking for signs of weakness or fear. When he spoke, his voice was a deep growl that carried clearly across the arena. "Little human," Gorvak said in heavily accented Standard Galactic, "I have killed 7 of your kind. You die quicker if you no fight back." Marcus didn't respond, keeping his attention focused on the gladiator's movements. Gorvak was trying to intimidate him, but Marcus had faced psychological warfare before. The key was to remain calm and not let anger or fear cloud his judgment. "Begin combat," shouted the referee. Gorvak immediately charged, exactly as Princess Zerafina had predicted he would. The massive gladiator covered the distance between them in 3 enormous strides, raising his war hammer high above his head for a crushing blow that would have flattened Marcus like a pancake. But Marcus was no longer where Gorvak expected him to be. The human soldier had rolled to the side at the last second, letting the war hammer slam into the sand where he had been standing. The impact was tremendous, sending sand flying in all directions and leaving a crater in the arena floor. Before Gorvak could recover from his swing, Marcus struck with his spear, aiming for the gap in the gladiator's natural armor just below his left arm. The steel tip found its mark, drawing first blood as it scraped across Gorvak's ribs. The crowd erupted in surprise and excitement. It was unusual for any gladiator to land the first blow against Gorvak, and completely unprecedented for such a small opponent to do so. Gorvak spun around with surprising speed, swinging his hammer in a horizontal arc that would have decapitated Marcus if it had connected. But again, the human was faster, ducking under the swing and backing away to maintain his distance. "You fast, little human," Gorvak growled, touching the blood on his ribs. "But speed no help when I catch you." The gladiator began a more methodical approach, advancing slowly while making shorter, more controlled swings with his hammer. He was learning from his mistakes, adapting his strategy to account for Marcus's superior speed and agility. Marcus circled his opponent, looking for another opening. The wound he had inflicted was superficial, barely more than a scratch on Gorvak's massive frame. He needed to find a way to cause more significant damage if he was going to have any chance of victory. The two fighters engaged in a deadly dance around the arena floor. Gorvak would advance and attack, using his reach and strength to drive Marcus back. Marcus would evade and counterattack, using his spear to strike at vulnerable points before retreating to safety. Gradually, Marcus began to wear his opponent down. Each successful strike from his spear added to Gorvak's collection of wounds, while the gladiator's massive swings began to slow as fatigue set in. The war hammer was an effective weapon, but its weight worked against Gorvak in a prolonged fight. However, Marcus was also taking damage. Several glancing blows from the hammer had bruised his ribs and left arm, and a near miss had torn his armor across the chest. More concerning was his stamina. While Gorvak was slowing down, the constant movement and adrenaline were taking their toll on the human as well. The crowd was completely absorbed in the combat, shouting encouragement and jeering at both fighters. This was the most exciting gladiatorial match many of them had ever witnessed, with neither fighter able to gain a decisive advantage. In the viewing box, Prince Vorthak watched with growing concern. This was not going according to his plans. Gorvak should have crushed the human within minutes, providing a quick and decisive victory that would clear the way for Zerafina's execution. "Your champion fights well, Princess," Duchess Kithara observed, her voice carrying a note of professional appreciation. I have never seen Gorvak pressed so hard in combat. Princess Zerafina kept her eyes fixed on the arena floor, watching every move Marcus made. He is a remarkable warrior, she replied, but this fight is far from over. She was right. Gorvak had realized that his usual tactics weren't working, and the gladiator was adapting his strategy once again. Instead of trying to land a killing blow with his hammer, he began using the weapon defensively, creating a barrier that Marcus couldn't penetrate with his spear. At the same time, Gorvak started working his way closer to the arena walls, trying to trap Marcus in a corner where his mobility would be limited. It was a smart tactical adjustment, and Marcus found his options becoming increasingly restricted. The turning point came when Marcus attempted a particularly aggressive attack, thrusting his spear toward Gorvak's throat. The gladiator caught the spear shaft in his free hand and yanked hard, pulling Marcus off balance. Before Marcus could recover, Gorvak's massive fist crashed into his chest, sending him flying backward across the arena. The human hit the wall hard, his shield clattering away across the sand. The crowd roared as Gorvak advanced for the killing blow, raising his war hammer high above his head. Marcus struggled to his feet, blood running from his nose and mouth, his spear lying broken in two pieces several feet away. "Is over now, little human," Gorvak declared. "You fight good, but Gorvak always win." Marcus drew his sword, the only weapon he had left. Against Gorvak's massive war hammer and natural armor, the short blade seemed pathetically inadequate. In the viewing box, Princess Zerafina closed her eyes, unable to watch her champion's final moments. Around the arena, the crowd fell silent, anticipating the spectacular conclusion to an unexpectedly entertaining fight. But Marcus wasn't finished yet. As Gorvak brought his hammer down in what should have been a finishing blow, Marcus did something that surprised everyone in the arena. Instead of trying to block or dodge, he stepped forward into the attack, getting inside Gorvak's reach where the hammer couldn't build up momentum. The war hammer struck Marcus's shoulder instead of his head, breaking his collarbone but allowing him to survive the attack. At the same time, Marcus drove his sword upward with all his remaining strength, finding the one gap in Gorvak's natural armor that mattered most, the soft tissue just below his jaw. The blade penetrated deeply, severing major blood vessels and damaging Gorvak's spinal column. The massive gladiator stumbled backward, his hammer falling from suddenly nerveless fingers. "Impossible," Gorvak whispered, his voice now a wet gurgle. "Gorvak, never lose." The gladiator collapsed to his knees, then forward onto his face. His body twitched once, then lay still. The arena fell completely silent. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, nobody moved or spoke. The unthinkable had happened. Gorvak, the destroyer, undefeated champion of the Imperial Arena, was dead. Marcus stood over his opponent's body, swaying on his feet from exhaustion and pain. His left arm hung useless at his side, and blood soaked his torn armor. But he was alive, and he had won. The silence was broken by a single pair of hands clapping slowly. Princess Zerafina had risen from her chair despite her chains, applauding her champion's incredible victory. The sound seemed to break the spell that had fallen over the crowd, and suddenly the arena erupted in noise. Some spectators cheered, impressed by the display of courage and skill they had witnessed. Others booed, angry at the upset of their betting pools. Most simply sat in stunned disbelief, trying to process what they had seen. In the viewing box, Prince Vorthak's face had gone white with rage and fear. His plan to eliminate his sister had not only failed, but had now created a public spectacle that would be talked about throughout the empire. Worse, Princess Zerafina's champion had proven victorious in trial by combat, which meant that according to imperial law, she was now officially innocent of all charges. "Remarkable," said Duchess Cathara, studying Marcus with new interest. "I have never seen a human fight with such tactical sophistication. This creature would make an excellent addition to any military force." The referee descended to the arena floor to make the official declaration. He examined Gorvak's body to confirm the gladiator's death, then turned to address the crowd. "By the ancient laws of trial by combat," the referee announced, "victory goes to the human champion. Princess Zerafina is hereby declared innocent of all charges and is to be immediately released." More chaos erupted in the viewing area as the legal and political implications of the victory began to sink in. Prince Vorthak could no longer execute his sister for treason. which meant that her evidence of his own treasonous activities was now a serious threat to his plans. Marcus barely heard the referee's declaration. He was focused on remaining conscious long enough to see Princess Zerafina freed. His vision was blurring from blood loss and exhaustion, but he managed to look up at the viewing box where she sat. Their eyes met across the arena, and Marcus saw something in her expression that he had never seen before, from any alien, genuine gratitude and what might have been affection. Princess Zerafina had found someone willing to die for her cause, and that person had somehow achieved the impossible. Medical personnel entered the arena to tend to Marcus's injuries. As they helped him from the fighting pit, he heard Zerafina's voice calling out in High Zephyrian. He didn't understand the words, but her tone carried a message that transcended language barriers. She had been calling his name. In the medical bay, Marcus's injuries were treated by imperial physicians using advanced healing technology. His broken collarbone was repaired with bone regeneration therapy, and his various cuts and bruises were treated with synthetic skin grafts and cellular repair nanites. The lead physician, an elderly Zephyrian with the bearing of a career military doctor, seemed impressed by Marcus's physical condition and recovery rate. "Your species possesses remarkable resilience," the doctor observed while monitoring Marcus's vital signs. "Most beings would have died from shock after sustaining these injuries and continuing to fight. How do humans manage such feats of endurance?" Marcus was too tired to give a complex answer. "We're stubborn," he said simply. The doctor laughed, a surprisingly warm sound. "I have heard this before about your people. Perhaps stubbornness is a more valuable trait than the Empire has recognized." While Marcus recovered, dramatic events were unfolding elsewhere on the ship. Princess Zerafina had been officially released from custody and escorted to guest quarters appropriate to her royal status. However, Prince Vorthak had no intention of allowing her to leave the ship alive, legal victory or not. The Crown Prince had activated a contingent of his personal guards and ordered them to arrange an accident that would eliminate his sister before she could return to the capital with her evidence. At the same time, he sent encrypted messages to his allies on the homeworld, instructing them to accelerate their plans for his ascension to power. Princess Zerafina, however, had not survived years of imperial court politics without developing excellent instincts for danger. She knew that her brother would never accept her legal victory, and that she had only a limited amount of time before he acted against her. Using her royal access codes, she gained entry to the ship's communication systems and sent her own encrypted message to the Emperor's personal intelligence service. The message contained not only her proof of Vorthak's treason, but also detailed information about his current plans and the location of the prison ship. Then she did something that surprised even herself. She requested permission to visit the human champion who had fought on her behalf. The request was granted, and Princess Zerafina was escorted to the medical bay where Marcus was recovering. When she entered the treatment room, she found him sitting on the edge of a medical table, his left arm in a healing apparatus but otherwise alert and functional. "You came," Marcus said, looking up as she approached. "I wanted to thank you properly," Zerafina replied. She had changed from her prisoner's clothing into a simple but elegant dress that suited her royal status. "You saved my life at great risk to your own. You would have done the same for me." Princess Zerafina studied his face, looking for any sign that he was merely being polite. "Would I? I am not certain. In our culture, self-sacrifice for others is not considered a virtue. It is seen as weakness or foolishness." "Then your culture might need to change." The comment was made without judgment or criticism, but it struck Princess Zerafina deeply. Here was a human, a member of a species the Empire considered inferior, suggesting that Zephyrian civilization itself was flawed. "Marcus, there is something I must tell you. We are both still in danger. My brother will not accept his defeat, and he has the resources to arrange our deaths despite the legal protections of trial by combat." "What do you suggest?" "I have sent word to my father's intelligence service. Help should arrive within hours. However, until then, we must remain vigilant." As if summoned by her words, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. The medical bay's lights switched to emergency illumination, and they could hear the sound of running feet in the corridors outside. "What's happening?" Marcus asked, sliding down from the medical table despite the protests of the automated healing system. Princess Zarafina moved to the room's communication panel and accessed the ship's internal network. Her royal access codes gave her entry to command-level information, and what she found there made her blood run cold. "Vorthak has declared a ship-wide emergency," she said. "He's claiming that I am leading an armed rebellion and that all loyal crew members must help suppress it." Marcus grabbed his sword, which had been cleaned and returned to him by the medical staff. "How many crew members are loyal to your brother?" "Unknown, but probably most of them. They are career military, and Vorthak is their commanding officer." The door to the medical bay burst open, and a squad of armed guards entered. Their leader, a battle-scarred Zephyrian sergeant, pointed his energy rifle at Princess Zarafina. "Your Highness," the sergeant said formally, "Crown Prince Vorthak has ordered your immediate return to detention pending investigation of rebellion charges." "I see," Princess Zarafina replied calmly. "And what is the legal basis for these charges?" "You are accused of conspiring with enemy prisoners to incite mutiny aboard an imperial vessel." Princess Zarafina smiled coldly. "Sergeant, I'm a princess of the imperial bloodline. Under what authority do you presume to arrest me?" The sergeant looked uncomfortable but held his ground. "On the authority of Crown Prince Vorthak, acting as ship's commanding officer." "The Crown Prince has no authority to arrest members of the royal family without approval from the Emperor or the Imperial Council. Your orders are illegal, Sergeant." Now the sergeant looked genuinely confused. Imperial military personnel were trained to follow orders without question, but they were also taught to respect the royal family above all else. The conflict between these two principles was creating visible stress for the professional soldier. Your Highness, I have my orders." "And I have given you new orders," Princess Zarafina said firmly. "As a princess of the Empire, I command you to escort me and my companion to the ship's command center so that I may speak with my brother directly." The sergeant looked back and forth between Princess Zarafina and Marcus, clearly torn between competing loyalties. Finally, his training in royal protocol won out. "Yes, Your Highness, please follow me." As they left the medical bay, Marcus whispered to Princess Zarafina, "That was impressive. Do you think it will work?" "For a few minutes, perhaps, but Vorthak will have prepared for this possibility. We need to reach the command center quickly." They were escorted through corridors filled with confused crew members and conflicting orders. Some sections of the ship were in security lockdown, while others operated normally. It was clear that Prince Vorthak's emergency declaration had created chaos among the crew. The command center was located at the heart of the ship, protected by multiple security checkpoints and armed guards. As they approached the final checkpoint, Marcus noticed that the guards here looked different from the ones they had encountered earlier. These soldiers were larger, more heavily armed, and they wore the distinctive black armor of Prince Vorthak's personal guard unit. "Your Highness," said the guard captain, not bothering to lower his weapon, "Prince Vorthak is waiting for you." They were escorted into the command center, a large chamber filled with control stations and holographic displays showing the ship's status and position. At the center of the room, Prince Vorthak sat in the captain's chair, still wearing his ceremonial robes from the gladiatorial combat. "Sister," he said without getting up, "you have caused considerable trouble this evening." "No more trouble than you have caused, brother." Prince Vorthak gestured, and his personal guards moved to surround Princess Zarafina and Marcus. "I am disappointed, Zarafina. I had hoped you would accept your defeat gracefully." "My defeat? You seem to have forgotten the outcome of the trial by combat." "The trial was a legal formality," Prince Vorthak said dismissively. "It changes nothing. You remain a threat to the Empire and to our father's legacy." Princess Zarafina stepped forward, ignoring the weapons pointed at her. "Our father's legacy? Brother, everything you have done has been in direct opposition to father's wishes. The peace negotiations, the political reforms, the end to aggressive expansion, these were all policies that he specifically ordered." "Our father has grown weak and sentimental in his old age," Prince Vorthak replied. "He no longer has the vision necessary to lead the Empire to its destiny." "And you believe that destiny involves endless war?" "I believe that destiny involves strength. The galaxy respects only power, sister. Species like the humans will never be our equals. They are meant to serve or to die." Marcus had remained silent during this exchange, but now he spoke up. "Your Highness, with respect, you're wrong about humans." Prince Vorthak turned to look at him with surprise and anger. "You dare speak in my presence, creature? You wanted to see if humans could fight. I just killed your undefeated champion. You wanted to test our resolve. My species has been fighting your empire for 15 years against impossible odds, and we're still here." Marcus stepped closer to the prince, though several weapons immediately targeted him. "But the most important thing you don't understand about humans is this: we don't give up. Ever. You can kill me, you can kill Princess Zerafina, but the war will continue until either your empire learns to coexist with other species, or until we're all dead." "Fascinating," Prince Vorthak said. "Such passion from such a small creature. Unfortunately, your defiance will not save you." The crown prince gestured to his guards. "Execute them both. Make it appear that the princess was killed while attempting to escape with her co-conspirator." The guards raised their weapons, but before they could fire, new alarms began sounding throughout the command center. A communications officer at one of the control stations called out urgently. "Your Highness, we have multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace. Imperial Navy vessels, sir." Prince Vorthak spun around to face the main display screen, which now showed a formation of sleek Imperial warships surrounding the prison ship. The lead vessel was a massive dreadnought that Marcus recognized from intelligence briefings, the Emperor's Wrath, flagship of the Imperial Guard. "Incoming transmission from the flagship," the communications officer reported. "They're requesting immediate communication with Princess Zerafina." Prince Vorthak's face went pale. The Imperial Guard answered directly to the Emperor himself, and their arrival meant that someone with considerable authority had intervened in the situation. "Accept the transmission," he said reluctantly. The main display screen flickered and resolved into the image of a Zephyrian admiral wearing the distinctive uniform of the Imperial Guard. When the officer spoke, his voice carried absolute authority. "Crown Prince Vorthak, by direct order of His Imperial Majesty Emperor Thanok, you are commanded to immediately release Princess Zerafina and her companions. Any harm that comes to the princess will be considered an act of treason against the imperial crown." The command center fell completely silent. Nobody moved or spoke as the implications of the admiral's words sank in. Princess Zerafina stepped forward. "Admiral Korath, this is Princess Zerafina. I'm unharmed and currently in the ship's command center." "Your Highness, His Majesty has received your transmission and reviewed the evidence you provided. Crown Prince Vorthak has been summoned to appear before the Imperial Council to answer charges of treason and conspiracy against the crown." Prince Vorthak finally found his voice. "This is outrageous. I am the heir to the throne. I will not be treated like a common criminal." "Your Highness," Admiral Korath replied coldly, "you are accused of attempting to assassinate a member of the royal family, interfering with official diplomatic missions, and conspiring against the Emperor's direct orders. These are capital crimes regardless of your royal status." Prince Vorthak looked around the command center, seeing his carefully laid plans crumbling around him. His personal guards were already lowering their weapons. They might be loyal to him personally, but they would never oppose the Imperial Guard. "Princess Zerafina," Admiral Korath continued, "His Majesty requests your immediate return to the capital. A shuttle is being prepared for your departure." "Thank you, Admiral. However, I have one request." "Yes, Your Highness." Princess Zerafina turned to look at Marcus. "The human warrior who served as my champion in trial by combat. I request that he be granted safe passage to a neutral world of his choosing, along with compensation for his service to the Imperial Crown." "Granted, Your Highness. The Emperor is most interested in meeting the human who defeated Gorvak the Destroyer." Marcus felt a moment of panic. The last thing he wanted was to be brought before the ruler of the empire that had been trying to destroy his people. "Actually, Your Highness," he said to Princess Zerafina, "I'd prefer to be returned to human space if that's possible." Princess Zerafina looked disappointed but nodded. "Admiral, can this be arranged?" "Certainly, Your Highness. We will escort the human to the nearest neutral station where he can arrange passage to human territory." Within hours, Princess Zerafina was aboard an Imperial shuttle heading for the capital world, while Marcus found himself on a neutral trading station in the Centauri system. Prince Vorthak had been taken into imperial custody to await trial, and the prison ship Vorthak's Revenge had been reassigned to imperial guard control. As Marcus waited for transport to human space, he reflected on the incredible series of events that had brought him to this point. He had gone from being a prisoner facing certain death to being a free man whose actions might have changed the course of the war. More importantly, he had formed an unlikely friendship with an alien princess who had shown him that not all members of the Empire were enemies of humanity. Princess Zerafina had risked everything to pursue peace, and her courage had impressed him more than any military victory he had ever witnessed. He wondered if he would ever see her again, and whether the peace negotiations she had spoken of would actually come to pass. The political situation in the Empire was clearly complex and dangerous, and there were no guarantees that her father's policies would survive the current crisis. Marcus was still thinking about these questions when a message arrived for him at the trading station. It was transmitted on a secure diplomatic channel and bore the seal of the imperial crown. The message was brief, but its contents changed everything. Marcus Chen, champion of the imperial arena. By order of His Imperial Majesty Emperor Thanok, you are hereby invited to serve as an official representative of human interests in upcoming peace negotiations between the Zephyrian Empire and the Centauri Alliance. Your unique perspective and demonstrated courage make you an ideal candidate for this critical mission. Please respond if you are willing to accept this honor. Princess Zerafina, Chief Diplomatic Envoy. Marcus stared at the message for a long time, hardly believing what he was reading. The Empire was officially inviting him to participate in peace negotiations. More than that, Princess Zerafina had specifically requested his involvement. He thought about his military career, his duty to his fellow humans, and the chance to help end a war that had cost so many lives. Most of all, he thought about the alien princess who had trusted him with her life, and who was now offering him the chance to help shape the future of the galaxy. Marcus activated the station's communication system and began composing his reply. 3 months later, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the neutral station Harmony's Rest, watching as diplomatic vessels from dozens of different species arrived for what was being called the most important peace conference in galactic history. The massive space station, built specifically for interspecies negotiations, hung in the void between Empire and Alliance territory, serving as neutral ground for discussions that could end centuries of warfare. Marcus wore civilian clothing rather than his military uniform, though he still carried himself with the bearing of a professional soldier. His role in the upcoming negotiations was officially that of Special Advisor on Human Military Affairs. But privately, he knew that Princess Zerafina had specifically requested his presence for reasons that went beyond his tactical expertise. The events following the gladiatorial combat had moved with startling speed. Emperor Thanok had not only survived the political crisis created by his son's treason, but had used it as an opportunity to accelerate his plans for ending the Empire's aggressive expansion. Prince Vorthak was currently awaiting trial on charges that would likely result in his execution, while his political allies found themselves under investigation by Imperial intelligence services. More importantly for the galaxy at large, the Emperor had formally announced his intention to negotiate comprehensive peace treaties with both the Centauri Alliance and several other major powers that had been resisting Imperial expansion. The announcement had sent shock waves through military and political establishments on both sides of the conflict, but it had also given hope to billions of beings who had lived their entire lives under the shadow of war. Marcus heard footsteps approaching and turned to see Admiral Sarah Chen, his sister, walking across the observation deck toward him. She wore the dress uniform of the Earth Defense Force, her admiral's stars gleaming on her collar. "Little brother," she said with a smile, embracing him warmly. "I still can't believe you're here. When we received word that you had been killed at Kepler Station, I thought." Marcus returned the embrace, feeling the relief of seeing his sister alive and well. "I'm hard to kill, apparently, though it was a close thing for a while." Sarah stepped back and studied his face. "You look different, Marcus, older maybe, or just changed somehow." "I've seen things, Sarah, done things, met people who changed the way I think about this war." Admiral Chen raised an eyebrow. "People? You mean the alien princess who requested your presence here?" "Among others." Marcus turned back to the viewport, watching as a particularly elegant vessel with imperial markings approached the station. "Tell me something, Sarah. If someone had told you 6 months ago that you'd be attending peace negotiations with the Zephyrian Empire, what would you have said? I'd have said they were insane. The Empire doesn't negotiate, they conquer or they destroy. That's what 15 years of war has taught us. And now, Sarah was quiet for a moment. Now I'm not sure what to think. The diplomatic communications we've received suggest that the Empire is genuinely interested in ending hostilities. But it's hard to trust people who have been trying to exterminate us for so long. Marcus nodded. That's exactly why I'm here. Someone needs to help build a bridge between our species, and apparently I've been elected for the job. Because of what happened in that gladiatorial arena. Partly, but also because I've spent time with Imperial citizens who aren't monsters. They're not all like the military commanders and politicians we've been fighting. Some of them want peace as much as we do. Admiral Chen studied her brother's profile as he watched the approaching ships. Marcus, there's something I need to tell you. The Admiralty wasn't entirely comfortable with your appointment to this diplomatic mission. Some of them think you've been compromised by your experiences as a prisoner. Compromised how? They think you might be too sympathetic to the Empire, that you could be manipulated by this princess who saved your life. Marcus turned to face his sister directly. And what do you think? Sarah met his gaze steadily. I think you're the most honorable person I know, and if you believe this peace process is genuine, then I trust your judgment. But I also think you need to be careful. The stakes here are enormous, not just for humanity, but for every species in this part of the galaxy. Before Marcus could respond, an announcement echoed through the observation deck. All diplomatic personnel please report to Conference Room Alpha. The opening ceremonies will begin in 30 minutes. Marcus and Sarah made their way through the station's corridors, joining a stream of delegates representing dozens of different species and political entities. The diversity was remarkable. Marcus saw representatives from the aquatic hydrosi, the crystalline silicates, the insectoid chitin confederacy, and many others whose names he couldn't even pronounce. Conference Room Alpha was a vast chamber designed to accommodate the different environmental needs of various species. The center of the room contained a circular arrangement of negotiation tables, while the walls featured environmental controls that could adjust lighting, atmosphere, and temperature for each delegation's requirements. As Marcus took his place at the human delegation's table, he spotted Princess Zarafina across the room at the Imperial delegation's position. She wore formal diplomatic robes that marked her status as the Empire's chief negotiator, and her bearing radiated the confidence of someone who had been born to rule. When their eyes met, she nodded politely, the formal acknowledgement appropriate for representatives of different governments. But Marcus caught a glimpse of something warmer in her expression, a reminder of the bond they had forged during their share.